It's like you have this dance between the fire and the kindling and then the flame creates, that spark and the kindling. But it's wild when you got a fella, some dudes running around out there, just a bunch of Luigi's just slinging fireballs off into the distance, you know, hoping it just lands on some random lady, passing by or laying out at a beach or just having a conversation. There's some wildness going on. It's the dark art. What's going on in the news? The Louis C.K. stuff. I want to comment on it, but I don't know if I'm going to get to that today. If not, I'll make sure to follow up on it on the next week's episode. And also got to let some of the information come out and things that's going on, But it's a wild, man. It's a scary time to be a man in a lot of places. And I don't know if it's like that in the rest of the country, but here in Los Angeles, it definitely feels that way. I'm on a lot of text chains where, men are scared that, if someone who doesn't like them comes out and says something, that it could damage their career, their future. Or also that if they did something, I haven't had any friends come to me and say, hey, Theo, I did this and I'm scared it's going to come out. But I could imagine that that men who have done some ice cold activities that they could be worried. I really could imagine that. I heard a crazy rumor today that someone's going to make accusations against James Franco, and that's going to be coming out next. I heard that today. Is that true? I don't know. There's a lot of rumors going around here in Hollywood, but that's what I heard, that he has a movie coming out, and that before that, someone is going to drop a accusation in order to put him on the rocks. Now, that could be total fiction. I don't know. I'm just sharing stuff that I've heard, because it's scary. It's a scary time, even for dudes that aren't getting any. I'm sure there's dudes who've just been in their apartment for a decade, just J-O-ing to themselves, wondering if, maybe one night they accidentally shot a load out a window and it might have, landed on a shoulder, dropped onto a woman who was going to get some groceries or visiting or putting some stuff in the recycling bin. But I think overall that it's change is always good. I think this kind of stuff is going to clear some of the air. And when I think about what some women have been through, sometimes this shit's got to be pretty dark, because every dude have nuts on him. And in a man's nuts is a little bit of fire. In a man's nuts is a little bit of fire. And sometimes that fire grows and sometimes that fire waits, and that's wild to think of. It's part of what makes us, humanity and existence and the Big Bang and everything. It's part of what makes all that work, is that fire exists inside of a man's crotch and nuts. But it's half of the element, because you got to have the fire and then you got to have something that will mate with the fire, the kindling. And scientifically, that's what that's the woman. It's like you have this dance between the fire and the kindling and then the flame creates, that spark and the kindling. But it's wild when you got a fella, some dudes running around out there, just a bunch of Luigi's just slinging fireballs off into the distance, hoping it just lands on some random lady, passing by or laying out at a beach or just having a conversation. There's some wildness going on. It's the dark arts. That's what it is. And I'm going to tell you guys, before we even get into the rest of this episode, what I would love to have more calls in about are the dark arts. But that is thing, I didn't get any calls from any black listeners. And so we may not have any black listeners. And that's a little bit scary to me. So my goal in this next couple of days is to find some black friends and get them to call in and give a couple of 2 cents on how nervous do black people get. Because to me, it seemed like black people never got nervous growing up, and more specifically black men, because those are the people that I was around the most. I was in a group when I was young called NFL, and that was when I was in 5th and 6th grade, maybe 7th grade. And you can guess what the N stood for. I'm not allowed to say the word. Lil Wayne can say it, if they, throws any hints out the window. But I would notice that my friends did not get nervous. My friends within that group did not get nervous. We had the ears pierced and the Chicago White Sox hat. We wrote NFL on our shirts and on our necks with charcoal and with lipstick sometimes. Dark lipstick, because one of my friends' mother wore dark lipstick because she had moles on her lips and she tried to cover them up. But let's get into some calls, man. That was the topic, and I got some of you guys' thoughts, so here we go.
Hey, what's up, Theo? This is Taylor from South Carolina, but
What's up, Taylor from South Carolina? You know, I used to go to college at Charleston there, right there in Charleston, South Carolina. And I was bouncer. I was a bouncer back in the day when I used to be on performance enhancing drugs. And they apparently enhanced my performance so well that I was able to barely make minimum wage working the front door at an Irish bar. So the this boy came in there one time with my brother's ID. He used a fake ID from Louisiana to get into this bar, and it happened to be my brother's, which is so bizarre because I barely even knew my brother very well at that time in my life. And then to see his picture pop up right in front of me, that was pretty wild, man. It was pretty. Anyway, onward. Let's hear some more.
I'm living out in Hollywood now. Thought I'd throw my 2 cents in on this whole black dudes getting nervous thing.
Okay, thank you for calling. Let's hear more.
And so I used to be a real big hater on Kanye.
Oh man, I thought you were gonna say. So I used to be a black dude. I was gonna be like, this is gonna be good. Used to be a big hater on Kanye. Okay, I'm guessing Kanye West. Let's hear more.
I always just thought that he was like a cocky asshole. He had this one line that kind of turned things around for me because he had this line that says, I'm a black man with the confidence of a white man. Hallelujah.
I'm a black man with the confidence of a white man. Hallelujah. Okay.
And I really respected him for that line because I thought that that was like his slick Kanye way of saying that he was a black man dealing with the insecurities that we all know white men have to deal with. Because in my mind,
Okay. You thought it was him saying, I'm a black man dealing with the insecurities that we all know a white man has to deal with. Okay. I don't follow that 100% because he's talking about confidence, but let's hear more.
black guys are the most confident dudes on the planet and drunk white girls, but it's
Yeah.
mostly like I've always thought that. That's always been a stereotype in my head.
Agreed.
And so when I heard that line and it like changed things of the way I look at Kanye, and then I took it to my black friend to like tell him, you know, how I felt about it. And he was like, no. And I had to flip the script, and that it was like a stereotype on the opposite side that white guys are known for being the most confident in a black community. So I think that it's just a misconception on both sides.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. It's a good thought. You know, it's a misconception. Maybe it's a misconception on both sides. If your friend said that, you know, that he thinks that white men were the most confident, I guess it also could be environment based. You know, like if I walk down the street in a black neighborhood, in you know, I'll use an example that I'm familiar with. You know, in certain black neighborhoods in New Orleans, I might feel unconfident. And a black guy might feel the same way in a white neighborhood, might feel unconfident, and might even feel nervous, you know? Or maybe black people, you know, maybe because of the history they've had in America, maybe a lot or some or many black people operate at nervous. And that's just, and so we don't even notice it because it's so ingrained in the histories that they've had to live, you know, the environments that they've had to live in. I mean, that's an interesting onward.
Good family. Kaiser parents. Mom was a nurse. Dad was some kind of janitorial services.
Okay, so you had a good friend whose mom was a nurse. He came from a good family. Onward.
Up at the Kaiser. Very good, well-off family.
And Kaiser's a hospital for those who don't know. Let's hear more.
Always have the latest shit. I remember he had that pad. You would connect to the Nintendo, and my fat ass would run, and you would have to jump and do the fucking hurdles. Anyway.
Dude, I remember that thing.
His older brother, Keith, green-eyed bandit, black gentleman, light-skinned gentleman.
Ooh, light-skinned Keith.
That counts. That counts. I did not know he robbed a bank, yo. He robbed a fucking bank. About 6 months, a year later, the house gets raided.
Wow. Dude, I've always wanted to rob a bank, honestly. I think inside of a man, in that fire that's in your nuts, we was talking about in the beginning, in that spark, you know, in that little bit of, in that nad spark, in that sack, in that sack, in that, you know, that little spark, in that little tricity, in that tricity that's, you know, chirping down in your nuts all the time, telling you to be a man, be a man, be a man, be a man. It's that last flicker of existence from the great beyond, from our forefathers, you know. It's that little whisper that's down in your fucking, in your wick. It's that little whisper in your wick. You know, I think in there, that thing also tells you to rob a bank sometimes. But let's hear more. So he did rob a bank.
Long story short, Theo, I know we're limited. The house gets raided. Helicopters, 10 units, the whole nine. He finally gives himself up after a couple hours, comes out smoking a cigarette like a fucking G, hands down, not even obeying command, nothing. Dogs barking, blah, blah. Helicopter, smoking a cigarette, putting his hands up, taking the cigarette out, putting it down, walking, and I remember looking at this from across the street like, what the fuck? Black people do not get nervous, my man.
Wow. I mean, look, that's a first-hand account. First of all, one helicopter would make me nervous, It definitely would piss me off if I'm trying to sleep, and I've had that happen many times here in Los Angeles. But that's for real. You heard him. Talking about that robber Keith, that bank robber. When brothers be bank robbering, they still don't be getting nervous. Man.
One-legged Patrick had a couple of good points about things that make black people nervous.
And One-Legged Patrick is the dude who called in on this past Monday episode, the episode on the 13th, and he referenced a conversation that I had on The Fighter and the Kid, which is what kind of spurred this whole conversation. So, yeah, he had some good points. Let's hear more. Thank you for calling.
He beat me to the paternity test one. But two things off the bat that come to mind that black people get extremely nervous about. Dogs, I don't know why, but anytime you see any kind of dog around a black person, they get nervous. And second, any swimming pool that is deeper than they are tall.
Yeah, I mean, those are some, dogs for sure. When I was growing up, they had, in some neighborhoods, black families had one type of dogs or two or three different types of dogs, and then white family had other types of dogs. Black families had more defense dogs, and white families had more peacetime dogs. Dogs that weren't on active duty. Dogs that were more like in the National Guard. Whereas black families have more dogs that were Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, more aggressive type dogs, which made me so nervous. And I don't know if that was part of it. Maybe it was, at those times. And we're talking when I was growing up, we're talking early 90s, or mid 90s. And that's, a time when there was you didn't see much black wealth in America. You saw a lot more disparity. The only wealthy black men I ever even saw, and not even personally, were in that movie Coming to America, or were athletes. And that was my truth that I saw, but yeah, the dog thing was definitely true. And then a lot of black neighborhoods didn't have pools, so I think pools were more of like a white person type of country club type of thing. Like I remember my buddy Devin, his family got one of those big kind of cistern things, and we would bathe out there. We'd swim out there, kind of just fill it up with water. And yeah, black kids, I remember him and his sisters and everybody would definitely kind of get nervous in the water, have fun, but be nervous because I think they just didn't spend as much time in it. They weren't as used to it, So that's interesting though. Do black people get nervous? And I would remember that because sometimes we would, like bathe. Sometimes his mom would bring out the shampoo and we'd all bathe out in the cistern thing in the yard. And, we were kids, so we weren't doing nothing perverse. But people had their genitalia around, you could see, if you was looking downward, you could probably see some different genitalias. And it was definitely a little bit unique. I remember that was unique because him and his sisters would get nervous. And his little brother would get nervous when